There's a lot of stories about backstage with the characters I haven't told because they're not safe for magic, but shh, I'm going to let the curtain down a little and tell you just a couple of them. There are a lot of things backstage at Disney that I haven't shared. Many of them because they're what we call not safe for magic. They kind of break down the barriers between the fantasy and the reality. A lot of that I don't talk about because I do like to kind of keep those up. But there are some stories that I've really been tempted to tell. A couple of them I've shared with patrons. A few years back, I actually did a brief live stream where I talked about some of them. And then promptly hit it. So only patrons get to see it. But there are some that, based on the passage of time and how well-known things are now about some of the backstage stuff at Disney and things like that, that I'm realizing that, it's not as secret. I'm not as worried about my non-disclosure agreements because I've seen much worse than what I'm going to tell out there. But there are definitely some interesting and fun things that you get to see when you work with characters. Part of it started on my very first day. When I started as a photographer at Walt Disney World, my very first day was at Magic Kingdom. So when you go to work at Magic Kingdom as a regular cast member, there's a huge parking lot back behind the park that you park in, you have to go through a security check, and then you hop on a bus that actually brings you through the back of the park and then around to the entrance to the utilidors. Well, at the time, Toontown was in the back, and you had a number of characters that met there. So I'm on the bus for my very first time riding in, and as we turn the corner by Toontown, there's a couple picnic benches out there. And Cinderella is sitting out there. You can tell it's Cinderella because she's got her crown in her hair and in her bloomers and a t-shirt, with a cell phone in one hand and a cigarette in the other. It just kind of goes, oh, that's right. Cinderella is a real person. You get to see the friends of the characters and the performers on the backside in a very different way than what the guests get to see. It can definitely make for some very interesting moments. As photographers, we definitely tried to be a little bit protective of our characters because the characters, if they were a fur, they had a hard time seeing, had a hard time moving around. If they were a face, oftentimes they were princesses, and you got these dumb people that seem to think that, oh, hey, look, there's a young lady there, it's okay to hit on them. Or furs, they're wondering, okay, is it a guy or a girl? So we really had to kind of step in and try to keep an eye out. Now, it wasn't everybody. It wasn't very often. But a couple times a day, you would see characters getting groped or grabbed or prodded. Maybe they're getting slammed or bumped into. For a fur character, you might see them trying to see if Mickey or Minnie or Pluto is a guy or a girl. Really? So you had to watch for it. I don't know, it makes you just kind of want to sit there and go, here, let me grab you the same way you're grabbing them and see how you like it. Like I said, not often, but a couple times a day. The princesses, they would get handed room keys, phone numbers. You'd have people that would whisper things to them. Sometimes guys in front of their wives or families. Is there like nothing going on upstairs? Most of the time, like I said, they didn't have this. Most families, most guests were fantastic. But there was just that small group out there. So you really had to watch for them. You had to watch what people were doing. I know you may have seen a couple of those videos where Pluto was chasing the kid around town square at Disneyland. It's because the kid had grabbed Pluto in a very inappropriate manner. So yes, the characters had to deal with this on a regular basis. They had to learn skills to cope with it. As a character, it's just not cool if you are having guests grab and poke and prod in places that they shouldn't, multiple times. Yeah, it was very frustrating. That was the kind of thing where we did learn how to if we saw it, we would take a picture of it, and then we would flag that picture for management to see, so that way those people that weren't real appropriate, they could get flagged and they could get walked out of the park. So yes, we did actually have a way to do that. Most of the time, though, be honest, I forgot to take the picture because I was busy yelling at the person to knock it off. Leave my characters alone. Characters also had to put up with a lot of other stuff. They're out there, they're sweating and working hard for the guests. They had different rotations depending upon where they were statused, where they were working. So if they were indoors, they would have a longer rotation time than if they were outdoors. Indoors, if they were a fur character, they may be out meeting guests for 30 to 45 minutes, depending upon what they're doing and the type of costume. If it's a face character, it could be as long as an hour. You learned wonderful little lines like Minnie has to go check on her cheesecake, or Pluto found out Mickey's got a new bone for him. Something to give the character an excuse to step off, to go behind the curtain backstage and switch out. Now, if they were outdoors, then typically it would be about 20-25 minutes. If it was cooler, a fur character may stay outside as long as 30 minutes. But on those hot days, 15. So, I mean, it would be walk out, greet a few families, and walk back in again. Because you didn't want them to pass out and have heat stroke. Face characters could go 30 to 45 minutes outside on hot days. Yes, they had to deal with getting sick. We had one time, I was working up in front of the train station at Magic Kingdom, and we had Mickey and Minnie out there greeting people, and then Donald was around the corner. Well, the character attendants started getting sick because it was so hot. And if you don't have the character attendants, you can't run the line. So we lost one, so we ended up with Mickey and Minnie together, and then we lost another couple, and so here comes Donald. So we ended up with Donald, Mickey, and Minnie all together. And it's hot, so they're on short sets, which means they're only out for like 15 minutes at a time. And let's see. Minnie is flirting with all the guys. Donald is causing all sorts of trouble. Mickey is trying to keep the peace, but at the same time, while he's watching Minnie flirt with the guys, well, fine, Minnie's going to do that. I'm going to flirt with the girls. And so you've got just chaos with the three of them together. In those 15-minute sets, they were seeing like 3 or 4 families when they should have been seeing a family every minute or two. And then at that point, it was so hot, time to pull them, go inside, have everybody wait till they can come back out again. And yes, so those times when they're going in, that is when you switch. So they would be on 15-20 minutes, and then they would be off for 40 minutes. So that way they could have plenty of time to rehydrate, cool off, and everything else. And that way they'd be ready to go. In the meantime, you'd have another friend go out. And so you would have a rotation. So if they were outside, it was oftentimes 3 different performers. If they were inside, it would be 2 performers. And yeah, sometimes it wasn't just the attendants that got sick. I can remember one time, poor Donald, we were over at Epcot, and Donald had this place right in front of the sun, right in the middle of the sun, over on the side of the pyramid. And Donald came out, and when Donald came out, you could sense something wasn't quite right because he wasn't quite walking straight, and you could sense that there was something there. And then as we started to have a guest come up, Donald wavered just a little bit. And we're like, you know what? And there is a hand signal that they use. We pulled the guest back because Donald signaled. And poor Donald was having heat exhaustion and was actually getting sick. And we had to help Donald walk off stage, let the management know, because the way that place was, you walk off stage and then it was another little walk to get to the break room. And we had to get Donald out safe before we could actually start taking care of Donald. Poor Donald got to leave on a stretcher because he was so dehydrated, hadn't been drinking water. I mean, what kind of duck doesn't drink water? It's a duck, right? It did happen. And so when you get those costumes like that, then of course they got to go back to costuming and they got to clean it. So yeah, sometimes they would have to deal with some stuff like that just, And I mean, going backstage too, depending again upon where they were. If they were indoors, they very likely had a dressing room area that was just a short walk. If they were outdoors, sometimes it could be quite a walk to get from where they were meeting the guests off stage to the offstage exit, and then from there over to a break room where they could change. And as photographers, we would often escort them to help make sure that you didn't have guests come running up from the side, especially when the Brazilian tour groups are in town, because they were notorious for just charging. Lines? We don't need no lines. It's Mickey. Yeah, and we literally would have to form protective barriers around the characters to keep these kinds of guests away. So you would walk backstage with them, and then as photographers, we were also trained to help as attendants. Well, if you're in those outfits, those big heavy suits and the costume pieces and everything else, you get to the trailer door, and if you've ever worked in theater, you understand this. That when costume changes take place backstage at the theater, yes, there's dressing rooms, but the costume changes, just because of timing, often don't happen in the dressing room. They happen right off stage, and they're changing and flipping clothes on the fly. Well, it's the same kind of thing. You walk into a character break room after they're getting off set, and they're hot, and they're sweating, and pieces of costumes just start flying. And you're helping them try to get these things off. So you may see Buzz Lightyear's knee pads go in one direction and shoulder pads in another. It was always interesting. And, sometimes you're helping and sometimes you're ducking and dodging so you don't get hit, and trying to make sure you stay out of the way while they get into a position where they can cool off. And you had to be prepared to, anytime you walked into an entertainment break room, because they were on break from being out performing, they were dressed extremely casually. Oftentimes it was shorts and a t-shirt. That was the standard. But there were definitely times, again, theater mind, there might be less than that. Now, there was never any nudity. There was never anything like that. But they were wearing what they needed to stay cool while still being decent. And it was funny because you could see the same thing at the parade. Here's something a lot of people don't realize is when Disney does its parades and they have the entrance and the exit, you might notice that there's some painting on the ground, these weird lines and stripes. Well, what those actually are is to mark out the areas where guests can see. So that way the people performing in the parade, they can actually see exactly to the point where guests can no longer see them. And so they're performing all the way through up to that. You'll see them dancing and smiling and everything else up to that line. And as soon as they cross that line, you will watch something like and just, they're done, costumes out, they're hot, they're sweaty, guests can't see them, they're no longer dancing, they're no longer smiling. In fact, they look like they're about to, they're toast, they're exhausted. There's people that will come running up with wet cloths to help cool them off and help them out of costumes. And parade exit it's fascinating to watch. If you ever work at the park, it's honestly, it's one of the most interesting, fascinating things. Just watching how they transition, watching how they help the characters off of the floats. And there are some characters, depending upon the float, that they may have to ride a little bit to get out of the way of everybody else coming off of the parade. Over at Magic Kingdom, they actually had an air-conditioned tent that a lot of the dancers, the non-costume characters, the non-character costume performers, that they would go into the tent so they could change their... So that was kind of the regular performers, and the characters would go off to another place, and there's people there specifically to help each of them. Just a fascinating thing watching how as soon as they step off, is what it's called, when they were stepping off stage, just the quick change in demeanor. We actually tease somebody at the job I work at right now because they'll be sitting in the back talking, this. And somebody will walk in, a customer, and they go, all right, hi, how are you doing? It's so good to see you. We're happy to have you here. And then they hit the door to go back and, okay, I'll go check on that. Oh my goodness, I can't. That's so theme parkish because that is exactly what it is. You're out working with the people and then you hit that stage and you just drop. So it was interesting. But yes, when you're working with characters, you see them have to put up with things from guests. You see them change. You see them have to deal with heat and exhaustion. And sometimes it can get a little bit ugly. So I hope you found this interesting. I'd love to know. Send me your questions. Would you like to know more? And hopefully I can still keep it kind of that edge where we can talk about it, but also not go too much into the not safe for magic. But I'd love to be able to share more with you. So who knows? Maybe we'll do more series. I hope you found this fun. My dog found it fun. My daughter's dog. But let me know. I'd love to hear your comments below. I also want to give a huge shout out and thank you to my patrons and my YouTube members, including Colin Milbourne, who just signed on as a patron. Thank you so much for joining, Colin. Thank you to everybody else supporting. They get perks and benefits. Check the description below. It'll let you find out more. Thank you so incredibly much for watching, though. God bless. When I started at Walt Disney World as a oh my goodness. I want to thank you so much for I want to thank my okay, hang on 1 second. I forgot something. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know your thoughts, your comments, your suggestions, your ideas. Be sure to share them in the comments below, or you can contact me. There's information in the description that has my email address, fan pages, information about merchandise, and so much more. So be sure to check that out. Don't forget to hit that like button, share the video, and if you haven't already, hit the button right up there to subscribe. And in fact, if you did enjoy this, I've even got another video for you right here. And also about these wonderful people here, those are my YouTube members and my patrons, the ones whose financial support makes this possible. I couldn't do it without them. If you want to know more about that and the perks that come with it, well, be sure to check the description. There's a link right down there. Thank you so incredibly much. God bless.